the list of the bones that we're going to be studying. Right, so we start with the clavicle actually. This is a very special bone. So the clavicle is the only long bone. There are three important features as far as the clavicle is concerned. The three important features about the clavicle is that point number one about the clavicle. The interesting fact about the clavicle is the only horizontal long bone in the body. This is the only long bone formed by membrane ossification. And also its fractures are never fixed by internal fixation. These are three important points about the clavicle actually. So yeah, so let's mention that. Ma'am, I'm using Microsoft Whiteboard. Right, so let's just put this there. So that's the clavicle actually. Okay, right. So before I explain these points to you, what are these three things? What are the three important features? Let's just take a look at the clavicle actually. Let's take a look at the bone itself and what it looks like and what are the features that you see on the clavicle. So the clavicle is when we are studying a bone, you have to know about the location of the bone, and then you also have to know about you have to know about the location of the bone. You have to know about the ends of the bone. If it has any borders, you have to know about the borders. You have to know about the shape, and also you have to know about its articulations. You have to know about any special features that are present on the surface of the bone. So you'll be seeing all of those. So basically, the clavicle articulates with the sternum. So you put the manubrium sterni here, and then, so if you see, this is the manubrium sterni, and that's the body of the sternum and the xiphoid process. So from there, if you look at it, the clavicle articulates with the upper part of the manubrium sterni here at this end, and so that is the sternal end. So this is the end that we call the sternal end. So the sternal end arches anteriorly like this and goes posteriorly concave like that at that end. Goes like that. So this is the articulation here, and at this end actually it articulates with the acromion process of the scapula, which is an extension of the spine of the scapula. So you have the scapula there, like this, and you have the coracoid process here, and that is the glenoid cavity, and you have the scapula there behind it, like this. Right. So these are the shape of the clavicle is an S-shaped bone, as you can see. So it has an S shape, which you can see there. So the shape is like roughly like an S, and it has two ends to it. So this end here is the smaller end, which articulates with the manubrium sterni, and this is the wider end. The wider and flattened end is the end that is which we call the acromial end, which articulates with the acromion process of the scapula. So this basically it has the S shape. So the medial 2/3 of the clavicle is convex in the body. It's actually convex anteriorly. The lateral 1/3 is concave anteriorly and convex posteriorly. So it has surfaces also, especially the lateral 1/3 has surfaces. It has a superior surface and an inferior surface also. So these are this is the shape of the bone. So it has two ends here. This is the sternal end here, and there's the acromial end there. So these are the two ends of the clavicle, which we just put mark there. So that is the sternal end, and this end here is the acromial end of the clavicle. And this part was what we call the shaft of the clavicle itself. So these are the different, these are the parts of the clavicle itself. So you can see that it has an S shape actually. Right. Now, there are features on the surface of the clavicle also. So the clavicle has a superior surface and it has an inferior surface. So on the inferior surface of the clavicle, when you look at it, you will be seeing that the clavicle actually has two projections which are present on the inferior end, two small projections which are present on the inferior end. So these two small projections that you see on the inferior end will be, it look like this. So you have one projection on the inferior end, which is present closer to the sternal end. And then there is a roughened area which you will see closer to the acromial end. So one projection here which is closer to the acromial end, and a roughened area which is present closer to the sternal end. So these two projections are what we call the tubercles of the clavicle. This is basically any kind of a tubercle or any kind of any of these things actually are areas of articulations, areas where there will be an attachment actually. So what it represents with actually in the clavicle here is actually the you have the first rib here. First rib goes like that. Since you have the first rib articulating here, so there is a ligament that connects the medial end of the clavicle to the first rib here. So that ligament that connects it here, like this, is what we call the costoclavicular ligament. So this tubercle on the medial end presents for the surface for the attachment of the costoclavicular ligament. So that is called the costal tubercle or the costal tuberosity. And on the acromial end here, you have this projection which is present here. This projection is what we call the conoid tubercle. Conoid tubercle. So this conoid tubercle is also a point of attachment for the ligament which originates from the medial end of from the lateral end of the clavicle and attaches to the coracoid process here. This ligament that comes down here is what we call the conoid ligament. The conoid ligament has another name. It is actually the coracoclavicular ligament, which extends from the coracoid process of the scapula and attaches to the clavicle. So that is the coracoclavicular ligament. This ligament is otherwise known as the conoid ligament. That is one of the ligaments of the pectoral girdle here. So these are the projections that you'll be seeing on the surface of the clavicle, on the inferior surface of the clavicle. Right, so these are the important points as far as the clavicle is concerned. Now coming to the points, the clinical points that I made with regard to the clavicle itself, if you look at it, these three things. It is the only long bone in the body which is placed in a horizontal position. Now if you look at it, it actually has a horizontal position. See, it's the only long bone. You take every other long bone in the body, they are placed vertically. But this is the only proper long bone which is present, which is present in a horizontal position. And then it's the only long bone which is formed by membrane ossification. Now this has a lot of clinical significance to it. So because this is now we all know the process of ossification of bones, how bones form. The process of ossification of bones takes place by usually long bones ossified by a process which is called endochondral ossification. Endochondral ossification is formed by, first there is a cartilage model which forms in that region, and then the cartilage cells will die, forming an empty space where the cartilage model was formed in the original place, which will then be replaced by bone tissue. So when the empty space is filled by bone tissue, it basically forms a model. So first there is a mold which is created by the cartilage, and then the cartilage disappears, leaving an empty space which is filled by bone tissue. So replacement of cartilage by bone tissue is the process of ossification. So this is our process of ossification here. So this process of ossification here is what we call endochondral ossification. So this is the process by which usually long bones in the body will form. Now, other than that, other bones of the body, especially the bones of the skull, flat bones of the body, that is the bones of the skull, formed by a process which is called membrane ossification. Membrane ossification is a process where a membrane is formed, and inside the membrane there's infiltration of osteoblasts, which infiltrate inside the layers of the membrane itself, and they lay down lamellar sheets of bone, sheets of bone, which finally forms the bone itself. That process is what we call membrane ossification. Bones of the skull as well as the mandible are formed by membrane ossification process. Other than those bones, the only long bone in the body which is formed by membrane ossification is actually the clavicle. It is the only bone which is formed by membrane ossification. And this is the reason why the clavicle actually, so that is, gives you the reason for the next point. Fractures of the clavicle are never fixed by internal fixation. If there is any kind of a fracture of the clavicle also, the normal procedure, the orthopedic protocol for fixation of the clavicle is only to adduct the arm completely by the side of the trunk and strap it to the trunk. Strapping it to the trunk is the procedure, is the method of fixation. So once that is done over a period of time, it will heal very quickly because again, this bone is formed by membrane ossification. Bones formed by endochondral ossification, you will have those long bones. Like for example, if you take say for example, there is a fracture of the tibia. So if there is a fracture of the tibia, the fractured ends have to be brought back together, and they should be opposed to each other, and only then there will be proper union. So to keep them opposed to each other, so a plate has to be put, and plate and screw fixation has to be done internally. Whereas the clavicle, since it forms by membrane ossification, even if the ends are not opposed to each other, even then fixation of the clavicle will form. That is one reason. The second reason why fractures of the clavicle are not fixed by internal fixation is that even if there is malunion, or even if there is a wrong union of the ends, if the ends are slightly bent, they are not straight when they join back together during the healing process. If they don't join back together properly, also, even if there is a slight bend, still it will not cause any kind of deformity, because the clavicle is not a bone that actually moves. There is not much movement of the clavicle. It is a supporting bone because it forms a part of the pectoral girdle. You can see how it forms a part of the pectoral girdle. So the function of the clavicle is to actually act as a strut. So how it acts as a strut is actually that it keeps the upper limb away from the body. So since the clavicle keeps the upper limb away from the trunk of the body, that allows the upper limb to have maximum variety of movement. If the upper limb was very close to the trunk of the body and there was no clavicle, and the upper limb was very close to the trunk of the body, then freedom of movement will not be there. Since it pushes the upper limb away from the body, the freedom of movement is provided. That is why it basically acts as a strut to provide for freedom of movement. So this is one of the important points you'll have to remember. This is the only long bone in the body formed by membrane ossification. It's one of those favorite questions that they'll ask you in competitive exams. Which of the following is long bone, which of the following bones is formed by membrane ossification? And they'll give you for the names of 4 long bones: humerus, radius, ulnar, and clavicle. So you'll have to remember this, that it is the clavicle which is the bone which is formed by membrane ossification. And this is one of the reasons why fractures are never fixed by internal fixation. Another reason why they are never fixed by internal fixation is also the fact that any kind of manipulation. Now you have to see the clavicle, right under the clavicle here is where you have the subclavian artery passing like this. And also the subclavian vein will be passing there. So since the subclavian artery and the subclavian vein pass just under the clavicle, that is the reason why they are called the subclavian. The reason why they are called subclavian is sub means under, clavian means of the clavicle. Since they pass just under the clavicle, any kind of manipulation of the clavicle might very well result in damage to any of these, rupture of one of these blood vessels. And these blood vessels are very, very important actually. So a rupture of one of these blood vessels will result in massive hemorrhage, which can easily become fatal actually, it can become catastrophic. And that is the reason why internal fixations of the clavicle are usually not performed, mostly. In fact, actually almost never performed actually. So that is this is about the clavicle, what you have to know about the clavicle. Then we go on to the next bone of the upper limb. The next bone of the upper limb